HaOmer and listening to music during the 3 weeks between Shiva Asar B'Tammuz and Tisha B'Av. But before we talk about listening to music at this time of year, I want to discuss a wider question of listening to music at all. Now, what music is appropriate all year round? And then once we understand what music is appropriate all year round, we can then come to a discussion of music during Sefirat Omer. But we're only going to touch on the music all year round as it relates to Sefirat Omer. And maybe at another occasion we'll speak about the idea of Jewish music and what music, we can listen to and what music perhaps best not to. Okay, so we're going to start with the Gemara in Sotah. It's actually a Mishnah in Sotah. But I just want to, before we look at this Mishnah, this Mishnah is describing our response after the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. And before we read the Mishnah, I want to explain to you the tension that the rabbis who lived at the time of the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai was alive at the time. He was a very important figure, and he navigated a very, very complicated sort of path. Because on the one hand, the Beit HaMikdash, it's very hard for us to appreciate the place that the Beit HaMikdash has in the Jewish heart, because we've lived for so many years without a Beit HaMikdash. But if we can understand just from the yearning for the last 2,000 years, you can get an inkling of how central the Beit HaMikdash was and Be'ezrat Hashem will be. But immediately after it was destroyed, you have to mourn the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. We need to have things which are Zeicher L'Churban, like Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, Tisha B'Av. There are certain things that we don't do. We'll look at them later. You break a glass at a wedding. Chatan pushes ash on his, on his head when he stands under the chuppah. There are lots of things that we do. Some things we do every day, sometimes once a year. But the stuff that we do which are Zeicher L'Churban. But if everything is Zeicher L'Churban and all we're doing is, memories of how good it was, so it makes it very difficult for us to appreciate the excitement of the Beit HaMikdash. So in addition to Zeicher L'Churban, there are also things which are Zeicher L'Mikdash, which is remembering like the excitement, like a Simchat Beit HaShueva now on Purim, on Sukkot, on Cholamot, when we sing a dance, to remember the Simchat Beit HaShueva that took place in the Beit HaMikdash, the things that we do which are Zeicher L'Mikdash. On Seder night when we eat Hillel's sandwich, we say Zeicher L'Mikdash Kilo. We want to remember what Hillel did when he ate his Korban Bezach. So on the one hand, I want to mourn, but on the other hand, I want to keep it alive. If it's all about things going bad, that's not a very good impetus for people for the future. So we're going to hear in this example of music, the rabbis navigating what music should we listen to. On the one hand, we're mourners because we have no Beit HaMikdash. But on the other hand, you can't be a mourner all the time. There have to be areas when you can have it. You follow? So that's the tricky path that we're going to track, we're going to follow, we're going to look at now as a Chazal try to explain to us what music we can listen to and what music we can't. Joy? Okay. So we'll start with source number 1 is a Mishnah in Masechet Sotah. It appears on Daf Memchet. And the Mishnah says like this, Mishe bat la Sanhedrin. After the Sanhedrin, the rabbis who would, they were the elders that sat in the Lishkat HaGazit in the Beit HaMikdash. In the court. Yes, in the court. When they stopped functioning, when the Sanhedrin was no longer functioning, Batel Ashir, Bevatei Mishtaot. There was time that we're not going to, no more singing at Batei Mishtaot, places of celebration. Shneimar, Bashir lo yishtu yain. In song, you don't drink wine. Now, it's quite hard to understand from that. This is a pasuk from Yishayahu. And the Gemara explains, but the Gemara is not on the sheet here. The Gemara explains how this pasuk teaches us about not listening to music. And the Gemara quotes another verse. It says this verse from Yeshayahu is referenced by Yirmiyahu when Yirmiyahu wrote the book of Eicha at the time of the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. And the pasuk in Yirmiyahu, this is chapter 5 in Yirmiyahu, says, Zekenim mishar shavtu, meaning the elders which is the Sanhedrin, they stopped standing in the shar. You know that they were, the Sanhedrin sat on Har HaBayit. On Har HaBayit, there was an Azara, and they were the big courtyard. And the big courtyard had 4 corners. And in each of the 4 corners, there was like a series of rooms in each of the 4 corners. And one of the 4 corners contained the Lishkat HaGazit. The Lishkat HaGazit is where the Sanhedrin sat. And interestingly, the Lishkat HaGazit was if this is the Azara, and then after that, this is where everyone can come in, and then you enter the Kodesh, which only Kohanim can come into. So when they built, it was on this wall, and it jutted into the area that only the Kohanim could go into. Anyway, so once the temple was destroyed, so then the elders who were at they were, I think the gate over here was Shar Nicanor. So the elders at the gate means the Sanhedrin that were next to between the Azara and the Kodesh. Shavtu, they stopped. Bachurim minaginatam. So then people stopped singing. Meaning this is Yirmiyahu describing the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, so that's the Mishnah and the Gemara that both indicate that once the temple was destroyed, we stopped singing. It's quite harsh, no? Especially for do people know that Micha is a recorded artist? Mm-hmm. Anyway, so it's quite hard to say that for people who are, it's quite hard to reconcile that. The Rambam, as you know, takes the Gemara and sort of writes it as halakha quite clearly. Read what the Rambam says. The Rambam says, Mi shecharav Beit HaMikdash, from the time that the temple was destroyed. And here it's talking about the second temple. Gazru Chazal, the rabbis at that time, meaning at the second temple, that is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and others, they decreed Shelo linagen b'chli shir uv'chol minei kli zemer. It's not appropriate for us to be playing instruments. V'chol mashmi'i kol shel shir asur lismoch bahem v'asur l'shom'am mipnei hachurban. It's not appropriate for us to be like celebrating jolly. We're mourners after the Beit HaMikdash, and therefore it wouldn't be appropriate for us to play music. Okay, so we've read. Now this is a bit harsh and a bit worrying, I would even say, because some of us nowadays may actually sing and might play instruments. But if we look at the Gemara and the Rambam, which the Rambam, as you know, codifies halakha, it's quite harsh. So I'm happy to say that this strict. It's important to know this is what the Mishnah says and this is what the Rambam says. But if we go to the Rishonim, starting with the Meiri classifies. Is that the right word? Or limits. Sort of explains that the Gemara and the Rambam that we looked at are not discussing all situations, but they're describing specific situations. That's the Meiri, and then we'll see after the Meiri that idea of the Meiri is followed in the Shulchan Aruch. So we go to the Meiri in source number 3. He says, Kol minei zemer ha'asuyim lenagen bahem lesimchat holalot. Anyone that's playing instruments. Now, simchat holalot is quite an outrageous. Simchat holalot is just like fooling around, not in a useful way. I think perhaps the musicians among us can confirm music is incredibly powerful. If somebody who's singing the right tune or somebody who's caught up in music, sometimes we go to Jewish music concerts, but sometimes there's a concert, and at the concert they make a video of that concert, and you can see that the kahal singing with the singer, and they're just somewhere else. They're just immersed in the song. You follow? Why? Because the music is so powerful. Now, if it's a concert of, singing psukim, so that's one thing. But you see the same sort of absolute consumed by the music, not only in a religious setting. So what the Meiri is saying is people that are playing music and they're caught up in this music in Simchat Holalut, which is just like like frivolity. They're not channeling that energy in order to strengthen their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning they're using this kli, which is music, which is an amazing tool, but they're not channeling it in a way that could lead to greatness. But they're taking it in another direction, or litzat mitzvah. They're not doing it, in order for a mitzvah. Ela derech kalut rosh v'tanuk b'minei ma'achal v'mishteh. They're just just trying to provide physical satisfaction. Asur l'shom'am u'lishta'asheh bahem. That is forbidden. You follow? It's that music that is not generating, is not directing us towards holiness. That isn't good. Ben shenasa azamer b'kli shir, ben b'shir bal peh. It doesn't matter if you're singing with an instrument or without one. V'chol shekeh b'makom shenashim mitzuyot sham shadavar mevi lehergel avera. Especially if you're singing in a mixed environment where it's men and women singing, and these men and women who are singing are not singing in order to lekadei shem shamayim, so that's not good. You follow? So I think what he would be saying over here is, I have to say, I don't know very much about non-Jewish music. I would say as a child, where I grew up in London, so my parents, my family, are open. We all have secular education. We all studied for degrees. But my parents were very particular. None of us ever listened to music that wasn't Jewish music. Like, we were never exposed to non-Jewish music. Well, I'll talk about non-Jewish music, which is this holalut, that I'm using this incredible kli, this powerful tool of music, but I'm not using it in a way to inspire myself to greatness, but I'm doing it to just, holalut, frivolity. However, so that's all no good. Umikol makom. However, kol sheyesh bo shevach u'tehillah l'Hashem yitbarach. If we're singing in order to give praise and gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Cohn, for example, piyutim or mizmorim, we're singing poems, or we're singing mizmorim, like praise of Hashem, mutar. You're allowed to do that. Afilu b'beit chatanim u'mishta'od. Even if you're in eating and drinking with it, or celebrating a wedding. Shekol she'in bo pritzut mutar. Anything that doesn't lead to a pritzut. Pritzut is like breaking down of the boundaries between people. Between men and women. Sort of there. Sometimes things loosen up a little bit with the music. As long as you're not falling into that trap, then it's okay. You follow? ואין לו לדיין בדברים אלו אלא מה שעיניו רואות לפי מקומם ושעתם. This is a very, very important line at the end of the Meiri. However, each generation has to make a judgment call, right? Based on what's going on in your generation. You can't say this is always fine, and you can't say that's always wrong. You have to see sort of the way that music is impacting people at that particular moment. You follow? So I can't read the Meiri and say, based on the Meiri, today you are allowed to say A, B, and C, and you're not allowed to listen to C, the other people. But you have to use your intuition. You understand that music that could lead to the breakdown of barriers between people and could lead people to sin, that's bad. But music that will inspire me and bring me closer to the one above, that's good. You follow? And that's basically the distinction according to the Meiri. Is that clear to everybody?
Can I ask you a question?
It'll be the greatest joy.
Well, so if we understand, the halacha on a pursuit level that Rambam brings down, is like Jews, there's no Beit Hamikdash, so we don't sing or play instruments.
So the Meiri limits it to holalut. The Rambam, the Meiri limits. He's not. He doesn't. He says, that's how I should understand.
That's how we understand.
Yeah, meaning that we can't. We do not live in a world where music is forbidden.
Okay. So, if we understand it like this, so the Meiri is saying Rambam never intended to say, for instance, that we can't say like Mizmor Shir or like during the prayer service or on Shabbat that we can't sing in synagogue. That's not what Rambam intended.
Yes, the Meiri. I don't think the Meiri is explaining the Rambam. I don't think he's not commenting on the Rambam, but I think he's presenting a position that could be the position of the Rambam. Is that you always have to be a bit cautious, say that's what the Rambam means, because there's always huge debate about what the Rambam meant. However, the Rambam, as you all know, is a heavyweight in Jewish law. You can't, if the Rambam has a very clear position concerning something, so the subsequent rabbis would be very cautious to go against the Rambam, and if they do sort of seem to contradict what the Rambam says, it's possible that they're not contradicting the Rambam, but rather they are limiting the words of the Rambam, and so the Rambam is talking about there's no place nowadays for frivolity. Meaning, maybe at the time of the Beit HaMikdash, I could have allowed myself just like to let go and just chill, whatever that means. Maybe there was a time in Jewish history where chilling could have worked. But now, we're saying not anymore. Oh, thank you so much. But nowadays, that's just not the way to do things. You follow?
Well, it seems to me like this idea of what's not allowed, of like stuff that'll lead to mixed dancing, right, is stuff that would never be permitted, even in the times of the Beit.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You're right.
If in this age, it would be forbidden in the age of in the second Beit Hamikdash, it would be forbidden for like men and women to get together and sing frivolously. And then we know
that from the big music that took place in the Beit Hamikdash was the Simchat Beit HaShoeva. And the Mishnah tells us it's the only time that we're told in the Beit HaMikdash, specifically, they separate, the men were in one area and the women were in another area because of exactly that concern. And that's in the Beit HaMikdash. That's at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. I see what
So you can probably see the argument I'm getting
at.
If it was this way before and it's this way after, it seems like...
Yeah, so what's he adding?
What's the
so I think on that... Yeah, so you're right. The Meiri's explanation of how he views music is talking in a wide context, and he's not really paying attention to this specific limitation as a result of the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash. That's a good point. To see that, we can turn to the next source, which is the Shulchan Aruch, where he does take the Rambam into consideration and still finds room to allow music. Just one word about the Shulchan Aruch. It's a long piece. I don't know, maybe we'll skim the first bit and then read the underlined bit at the end. The Shulchan Aruch, as you may know, is a very important book of Jewish law, but the Shulchan Aruch, in the introduction, I look over there because he's over there, just behind, just behind you. Yeah, there he is. No. That one there. Yeah, thank you so much. Just behind Moshe Rabbeinu. Thank you.
Moshe?
Oh, no, not Moshe. I'm so sorry. Zachariah, how are you doing? Do you prefer to be called Zachariah?
Yeah.
Okay.
More than Moshe.
Yeah. Okay. So in the introduction to the Shulchan Aruch writes how he reaches his halachic conclusions. And he took what he considered to be the three most important halachic authorities prior to the Rambam, prior to the Shulchan Aruch, and he would look at if two of the three agreed, then that would be the halacha. And the three that he chose was the Rambam, that's number one, Rif, that's Rav Yitzchak Alfasi 3 generations earlier, and the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, who's a commentary on the Gemara, also around the same time. Now, what's interesting is that the Rif is the teacher of the teacher of the teacher of the Rambam. In other words, the Rambam follows the tradition of the Rif. So the Rif and the Rambam almost always, wouldn't say almost, but they very, very often agree with one another, which means that the Shulchan Aruch most often follows the opinion of the Rambam, because it's the Rambam and the Rif are already one team. So they're normally saying the same thing. You follow? So now, with that introduction, let's see how the Shulchan Aruch, goes back to Micha's point, let's see how the Shulchan Aruch reads the Rambam that we read. Okay, so he starts with an introduction. Mishecharav Beit HaMikdash. When the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, Tiknu Chachamim, the rabbis instituted, She'ein bonim le'olam binyan misuyad u'mechuyar mitzuyar kevinyan hamalachim. That when we build our homes, you should never build a home that is complete. And you may have seen this when you go to people's homes; they leave like an amah by an amah opposite the entrance of the home that is not painted. And the reason why they leave that is because our homes are not complete until the Beit HaMikdash is rebuilt. And then he gives various other examples. How you put the Rambam will continue, won't read it, how you put ashes on your head under the chuppah. You break the glass at a wedding in order to zeicher l'churban. You know that our Jewish lives are not complete. And he gives various examples of things that we do today which are zeicher l'churban. If you remember from the introduction, the zeicher l'churban and the zeicher l'mikdash. And it's about that balance. Okay, so he writes the Zeichel L'Churban of concerning music. V'chein gazru. This is the bit which is underlined at the bottom. Shelo lenagen b'chli shir. We don't play musical instruments. V'chol minei zemer. V'chol mashmi'ei kol shel shir l'sameach b'hem. We don't use music to cheer ourselves up nowadays. Now the Ramah adds to that. V'yesh omrim davka mishir agil b'hem. When it says you don't listen to music, it's talking about a king. She'omdim v'shochvim b'chli shir or b'beit hamishteh. He's talking about like kings, you know, in the olden days, they would like go to sleep to music and they would wake up to music. Music was part of their life like every day. Nowadays, just for you to remember, when the Shulchan Aruch speaks about music, I actually looked this up this morning, but the first recording device was invented in the 1870s. That's like 150 years ago. So until 150 years ago, the only context of music was live music. You follow? So if I like listening to music before I go to bed, that's just not an option for me unless I'm a king. Because he's the only one that's going to have a choir outside his bedroom door. You follow? So the idea of listening to music was only really an area in which only the most wealthy people in the world would have the opportunity to have music on a regular basis, unless I was playing an instrument, you know, I practiced an instrument, or I was very wealthy and I had my own orchestra. You follow? So this limitation is talking about those people that have this luxury of music around them. You follow? So he says, "Va'asur l'shomam b'fnei churban." You can't listen to it because of the destruction. Even shir b'peh, even if it's without music, right? Ukvar nagu. How? Okay, that's the first part. And then he continues at the end, and this is important in terms of what we can do. Ukvar nahagu kol Yisrael. The Jewish people have taken a sort of I don't know what the sort of developed this custom. Lomar divrei tishbachot or shir shel hodaya v'zichron chasdei HaKadosh Baruch Hu al hayayin. The Jewish people, even though we have this limitation, nevertheless, the Jewish people sing. We are a singing nation, and we when we get together, we sing in order to give praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'chein l'tzorach mitzvah, and we do that also for a mitzvah. In order, for example, at a wedding, we sing. Hakol shari, all of these things are permitted. So the Shulchan Aruch is saying that even though we have the Rambam and we had the Gemara, the Mishnah that says there's no music, Kfar Nahagu Yisrael means that it's true that we have this very, very strict legislation, but if you go to any Jewish home, you'll hear them singing Zmirot Shabbat, and you'll hear people playing instruments at weddings, that we have used the vehicle of music as a tool with which to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You follow? So it's true that just stum music, like the kings that used to have an orchestra that would wake them up in the morning, that sort of stuff, we don't do that. A bit like the plaque that we have, the plaque that we have at the front of our homes, our lives are incomplete. But it's not that our lives have no music at all, but there is a context in which we do have music. You follow? So it's like that luxury of music in my everyday life that the kings may have had, we don't have that. Just like we have this part of the house which is incomplete. But music to accompany moments of our lives, like at a wedding, or when we get together for a Shabbat, or a Tish, or the beginning of a Shir, when we sing, that's allowed. You follow? That's the Shulchan Aruch. Is that clear to everybody? Don't forget, this is still way before recorded music. So he's just saying that when Jews get together and they sing and they play instruments, that's fine, because they're doing that in order to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But that luxury of like music as part of my daily life, having my, Jews would not hire a harpist to have around the house, to make a...
That makes sense.
Ah, good.
Well, it's like a kind of a luxury or almost frivolous practice, and it seems like something that would be permissible if the Beit Hamikdash is standing. Like if a king wants to have a harp player, Israel is like
right
with the temple. And clearly, it was permitted at one point that kings.
Right. So there's something about these luxuries that we don't have nowadays. Exactly. Our lives are less luxurious today than they were at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. But it's not that there's no music in our lives, but there's certain luxuries that we don't take part in. We don't complete our homes.
And we don't hire a harpist.
Right,
even if
right.
Like a person could afford that.
Even nowadays, there are many people. I don't know if you've been to weddings in Jerusalem. There are many people who do not play instruments. If you have a wedding in Jerusalem, they'll only have a drum kit because drums aren't an instrument. They're just like just playing a rhythm, but there'll be no other instruments. Have you ever been to a wedding like that?
A few weeks.
Huh?
2 weeks I will, but...
So that most people do not say, they say, because even the Shulchan Aruch said it, that we are allowed to play with musical instruments. But the feeling of loss, the Zeichel Churban, is more intense in Jerusalem than outside of Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So you could have a family it's the problem is the musical instrument in Jerusalem, because I'm dancing with an instrument at the place where the temple was destroyed. Mm-hmm. And that's too much. But to play a new musical instrument, if I get married in any other city in Israel, so that's fine.
That's a big thing for now.
Does that make sense?
No, because if she's married outside of Jerusalem now, it makes sense.
So all weddings, no one forbids musical instruments at a wedding outside of Jerusalem, but there is a debate about musical instruments at a wedding in Jerusalem, because that's, sort of, even the Rambam, the Mishnah, when they were talking about no music. So I can say that it doesn't apply nowadays. It's a wider context of how to understand music and its impact on our lives, but at the place where the destruction happened, it's harder to justify than elsewhere. Okay, So we've now said that what music is allowed. What music is allowed is that shirot v'tishbachot, when I'm singing in praise to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, meaning I'm using the music as a vehicle with which to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So we sing a Shabbatot, we sing a Melava Malka, somebody could bring out a guitar, and that's all fine. There's no limitation on any of these things. Even at a wedding we can sing and dance. What's inappropriate is that music that accompanies life. And I think maybe we'll discuss that type of music in greater length in another discussion. So I want to get to Sefirat to Omer, which is really our discussion for today. But I just want to make two more limitations about this. If we look at the Mishnah Brura says something very, very interesting. He quotes Likutei Maharil. Maharil is also a Sefer Halakha. He writes, Shelo kadin hu shemasharim b'mishteh odecha ki anitani. He thinks it's wrong when we sing that we sing verses. L'simchat meriut. Ki az haTorah chogeret sag v'omeret asauni banecha kamin zemer. Because when I use psukim as lyrics for a song, I am demeaning the words of the prophets or the words of God and turning them into a song. And I shouldn't do, like they let the pasuk Shema Yisrael. Mm-hmm. Shema Yisrael is not a song; it's a prayer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How could I reduce it to a lyrics of a song, which is what the Mishnah Brura says? Ach, b'Beit HaKnesset, if it's in the context of a Beit Knesset, that's all right. But like the Chevra are sitting around playing guitar and they're like singing Shema Yisrael, is that an appropriate way to treat these holy words? And therefore the Mishnah Brura says music is okay, but you have to be careful about the words that you use. If you write words to a song, you sing a poem, that's okay. But to sing psukim is a problem. You hear that? That's a Mishnah Brura. It's quite a harsh position. I'll just add to that. When I was in yeshiva, quite a few years ago, we had on a Friday night, we were all singing some songs, and at one point, one of our rabbis told us we have to stop singing because he didn't feel that we were singing seriously enough. You know, when you sing psukim, you should be aware that you're singing a pasuk. And when you're just sort of like half chatting and munching some bamba and then singing psukim, I would never say the pasuk in that way in the Beit Knesset. So why is it okay to say that pasuk in that way at another time? I mean, it's quite a harsh reading, but it's, that's the position of the Mishnah Brura. I would add, interestingly, the Mishnah Brura lived at the beginning of recording. He lived at the beginning of the 20th century, about 100 years ago, and we said about 150 years ago was the invention of recording equipment. So the possibility to listen to recorded Jewish music, or any music, was something that was just beginning at the time that he was writing. Okay, that's the Mishnah Brura. Most people do not follow the Mishnah Brura, they follow the Aruch HaShulchan, and he writes, this same lashon of the Shulchan Aruch, Kfar Nahagu, do you see that? Kfar Nahagu Kol Yisrael Lomar, Shirei Tishbachot, or Shir Shel Hodaot V'Zichron Chazei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then he adds, Kelomar, Tepekahai Kafna Fil B'Mesetet HaReshut Mutar. The Shulchan Aruch, when it says that nowadays we see that people sing psukim, so the Aruch HaShulchan explains that the Shulchan Aruch was talking at regular meals. When the Shulchan Aruch sort of opened up this opportunity to sing Jewish words, he wasn't just talking about the Beit Knesset, he was talking about wherever you might be. And therefore, I can sing psukim, even if I'm sitting at home munching bamba. Is that clear? So the debate between the Mishnah Brura and the Aruch HaShulchan, who both lived about 100 years ago in Europe, the debate is like, what's the nature of a tish? Now, when you come together in a tish and you're singing, so I think the Aruch HaShulchan had a much holier we could say, sort of, he was done the kafzachut, looked at the good side of the Jewish people. And they're not just like saying the words as lyrics, but the music is capturing them, and they're using the music in order to develop a deeper connection to these words. You follow? Whereas a Mishnah Berurah was saying you have to be cautious about it. The reason I mention both is just the next time you do find yourself in a place and you're singing songs, understand that it is a very deep experience. It's not like, I don't know, watching a film or chatting on the phone. It's a religious experience to be involved in singing a nigun. That becomes clear from both of those. Okay, everything clear so far? Okay, that was all an introduction to our topic, which is music during Sefirat Omer. Are we allowed to listen to music during Sefirat Omer? When I say that was an introduction, sometimes you think introduction. If that introduction is 5 minutes, that means the shir is an hour. So the introduction happens to be longer than the actual discussion, just to calm you all down. Yes?
Question. In Japan, the tradition karaoke is in Israel?
Karaoke.
Yes. So, according definition, Jewish can go karaoke to sing another country songs.
Karaoke is a very good question.
We have karaoke here in Israel, not in probably like religious places.
No. We have a religious karaoke. No, you can have karaoke. The truth is,
Just had that where I was before.
Huh?
Like that. Throw that before, like you're like playing it, like the Hasidic karaoke.
yeah, karaoke is something that a lot of people do. I think that there is a caution. There is I don't know if the word is a wariness in Chazal that music is a very, very powerful force, and therefore the rabbis want to be careful to ensure that we experience music in the right environment. But I'm going to quote to you, remind you what the Meiri said, which I think is a very good guide. Ein lo ledayan b'dvarim elu ela ma she'einav ro'ot lefi mekomam v'sha'atam. That each generation should judge what's going on at that moment. So I can't say karaoke is fine. I can say that this moment is fine. Normally, and you have to trust your instincts a little bit. When you know you're in a good place, you know, and when you know I shouldn't be there, you know. You know, I mean, in music, I think that, I know the Meiri is saying this is something that the Dayan needs to say, but I think there's probably karaoke that's great and a lot of fun, and it's enjoyable, and people get to know each other, you know, like it's a fun activity, and there's probably other types of karaoke that isn't such a great idea. But it depends on the setting, and it depends on what music you're singing. Does that answer your question?
So, I mean, it has a more connection with Hashem. If it's not, Hashem is more spiritually more in, like feeling like being in different universe. Like
So I want to talk about that because we haven't spoken at all, but I think we might leave this for another week. We haven't spoken at all. Let's say, can I listen to Tchaikovsky? Or can I listen to the Beatles? You know, that's not Jewish music. Is that forbidden? Like, what's good? Like, what music is allowed and what music is not allowed? Is it only music that is psukim or songs that bring me closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Or do I say that, in other words, do I say that all music is bad, and then there is a type of music that I use to deepen my connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that is good? Option A. Or do I say all music is good, and there's a little bit of music that could take you to bad places, and that's bad? You follow? Now, I think that's
every year that passes, it goes more towards the bad music side. Yeah.
It's getting better a little bit.
No, it's not. It's very bad.
Very.
Yeah, so that's a very important discussion of what makes Jewish music Jewish. Because a lot of the Jewish music today are, you know, the music wasn't necessarily composed by Jews. I'll just tell you one story. I'm not going to even answer the question because I think maybe we'll have a discussion about this another day. But I'll just tell you something very funny, and that is there was when our kids were little, we used to get cassettes, and when you get a cassette, as you probably don't know, he used to come with a little booklet, and the booklet would say the words of each song and who composed each song. And it was all written in Hebrew and in English. And there was one song, there's a group called ABBA. Have you heard of
Yeah.
ABBA?
Oh yeah.
So
The children of Nazis.
really?
The Nazis,
What?
Yeah.
Oh, so you won't be
Children of
happy to hear what
Nazis,
I'm saying now. So this book, this CD, or as a tape, when it came out, when it had who composed the music, they wrote in Hebrew, Nigun mi beit Abba. Do you know what that means? Like it's Abba means in Hebrew my father. So it makes it sound like it's a traditional tune that I heard from my father. Nigun mi beit Abba. So if this Jewish singer sings it, does that now make it a Jewish song? You understand what I'm saying? So that's quite an interesting debate, but it's not our debate for today. Like what makes music Jewish or not Jewish? I think that's a good discussion, but it's not a discussion for today. I want to get to Sefirat HaOmer. Okay, because as you know, we don't listen to music in Sefirat HaOmer, apart from, as you probably all know, on Yom HaTzmaot, we were all singing and dancing, celebrating on Yom HaTzmaot, which is why I was thinking about it this week. So if you have a look at the Shulchan Aruch that talks about Sefirat HaOmer. So he says like this: No hagin, we have a custom, shelo lisa isha, not to get married, ben Pesach la'atzeret ad Lag BaOmer. You don't get married between Pesach and Shavuot until Lag BaOmer. Why? Mipnei she'ba'oto zman metu talmidei Rabbi Akiva. Because the students of Rabbi Akiva died at that time. You are allowed to get engaged, but you're not allowed to get married. And if somebody did get married during this time, the marriage works. It's just a custom not to get married. That's point number one. Point number two. Oh no. Well, point number Sif Bet, but it's not over here. Is another thing that you're not allowed to do. The Shulchan Aruch says, you're not supposed to shave. No shaving during Sefirat HaOmer. So in the Shulchan Aruch, there are only two things that the custom not to do. One is you don't get married, and you don't shave. There's no mention about music. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't say you're not allowed to listen to music. Where does this idea of not listening to music during Sefirat HaOmer come from? Oh, excellent. So the Magen Avraham is a commentary, source number 8, a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch, writes over here. Venirali, oh no, one second. You're allowed to make an engagement party. Aval lasot rikudim umecholot shel reshut nahagu le'esor. To have rikudim umecholot, like dancing on during these days of Sefirat HaOmer is forbidden. Don't forget, the Magen Avraham is talking about pre-tapes or pre-whatever machines people listen to music on nowadays. So the only time you wouldn't hire musicians by yourselves, but you wouldn't have communal live music because that people would be up and dancing. What's forbidden is dancing. Not just at a wedding, but any sort of dancing is not allowed. Those are the words of the Magen Avraham. Is that clear to everybody? Okay, now on that Magen Avraham, we're going to look at 3 positions about what music you are allowed to listen to on during Sefirat HaOmer. I'll just point out in brackets, by the by, that's why there's really very little debate about whether you're allowed to dance and sing on Yom HaTzmaut. Yom HaTzmaut, we are commemorating a huge miracle that happened to the Jewish people. So the Avelut of Sefirat HaOmer is paused because we're celebrating a Chag. Exactly. Like Chol HaMoed Rosh Chodesh, but it's because the Shulchan Aruch never forbade it. So you follow. I don't even need a big reason to allow singing and dancing on Yom HaTzmaut because it's not like it's based on sort of a pasuk and then a pasuk to to the Gemara, and then the Gemara to the Rambam to the Shulchan Aruch. None of those sources mention music. The first mention of music is in the Magen Avraham. You follow?
When was Magen Avraham lived?
Magen Avraham, well, the Shulchan Aruch was 400 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So in the last 400 years.
Okay.
He's like,
But not recently, maybe 300 years ago.
like 350, 200.
Yeah, Rav Avraham is with a Gimel, his
think-
surname. I can't remember exactly.
Where was he? I think either French or Spain. Maybe. No.
Okay.
Random band. I forget.
Okay, now we're going to go down. We're going to jump down now to the Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan is 100 years ago. Now, the Aruch HaShulchan does forbid music over. Mutar lasot su'udah, ach belo rikudim u'mecholot. Right at the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch. Do you see? You're allowed to make a meal if someone gets engaged. Now, the last line of the Aruch HaShulchan, source number 9. V'chol sheken she'asur lizamer b'chli zemer. You're not allowed to play musical instruments. V'chein besudat harashut mutar. But without rikudim umecholot. Rikudim umecholot is machol is like a circle, dancing in circles. Okay. So we see this prohibition. The prohibition of singing goes from the Magen Avraham and it continues into the Aruch HaShulchan. From there we get to Rav Ovadia Yosef in source number 10. Source number 10 is from a book called Yechaveh Da'at. Rav Ovadia Yosef used to have a weekly radio program, and people would call in and ask him questions, and then his responses were then written up, and that's what there's. It's a 6-volume book of Yechaveh Da'at. If ever you like learning a responser, because it was live radio in Israel, it's always very interesting, practical halakha. You know, not like some obscure question, because they're based on questions that he was asked on national radio. Anyway, so he was asked about listening to music during Sefirat Omer. So he writes over here, even though generally you are allowed to listen to music, do you see derech haradio, using your radio or your whatever you had in those days? Shirei Kodesh hamluvim b'kli negina. So we see he's quite established, which is good for us to hear, that you're allowed to listen to music with musical instruments during the year. Aval b'yimei Sefirat, during these days, and also Bein HaMetzarim. Bein HaMetzarim for Ashkenazim is from Shiva Asar B'Tammuz until Tisha B'Av, and for Sfaradim miRosh Chodesh Av until Tisha B'Av. Yesh limanam mileshamam. You shouldn't listen to music at that time. Umikol makom b'simchat mitzvah kagon mila or pidyon haben. If there's a brit milah or a pidyon haben or siyum masechet, or you completed a book or bar mitzvah, mutar lishmo shirei kodesh hameluvim b'chlei shir. You would be allowed to listen to music if you're having a simcha shel mitzvah. Shekol shehi simchat mitzvah yesh lakel b'davar. So if you're celebrating a bar mitzvah during this time, you'd be allowed to dance with music. So a wedding you can't have because you can't decide when a wedding is going to be. But a bar mitzvah or a pidyon haben or a brit milah, you can't really fix when that's going to happen. So you would be allowed to celebrate with music at these events. Yeah? Okay. V'shir of a pair without musical instruments, shu derech hoda'ah Hashem d'mar b'li klezir muteret af b'yamim eila. And this is where we get to all these vocal. You know, some people listen to music. They're all. You can even get these CDs now of a cappella music. Why? Because he says without musical instruments, you're allowed to listen to music, even at this time. And obviously, you're allowed to sing in prayer. You know, it's not that there's no problem in music. I think what Rav Ovadia Yosef is trying to explain here is the Magen Avraham, when he forbade music, the Magen Avraham was talking about a situation where you hardly get to listen to music, because the only way to listen to music is to have an orchestra. But if I didn't have an orchestra, I would have no access to music. So when the Magen Avraham says no music, it means don't listen to, don't go to a live music, you follow? But the Rav Ovadia is not talking about. He's talking. It's a time where people were listening to CDs at that time, and nowadays even more so with on your smartphone you can listen to basically every song that ever happened is available at a touch of a button. So now that music which is available. So he has to explain that the problem isn't music. You follow? Because music is much more part of our lives every day today than it was 150 years ago, because I carry it around with me all the time. Nobody listened to music when they were walking down the street 150 years ago. He's talking about places where you might listen to music that could be a problem. You follow? But if when I'm walking so I don't get bored, I listen to something, that's not a problem. You follow? And then he also, let's say I'm allowed to, when I daven, I'm allowed to sing. If I learn, the music that accompanies my day-to-day life is fine. It's when it's more organized, like with the instruments, that's when it becomes more of a problem. You follow? But the distinction, I don't think the distinction is between instruments and non-instruments. It's more to do with formal and informal. Like to do singing without instruments, impromptu, is much easier. But once you get instruments, it's more of a serious undertaking. Yeah. Were you going to ask something, Micha?
I just had a comment. Something I found interesting is, since as a music lover myself, I notice these things. Oftentimes when I go to the shuk, there's usually somebody busking there. There's somebody playing guitar.
Yeah.
Guitar case open.
Mm-hmm.
And during Sefirat HaOmer, I haven't seen anybody performing music in the shuk.
Mm-hmm.
But I did see the other day I went. There was a guy playing percussion on like buckets and makeshift drums. And so I guess that's
that
okay,
probably
it's
is.
not a stringed instrument.
Yeah,
There's no notes.
Yeah.
So it's not like there's no harmony. It's only rhythm.
Yeah, as I mentioned, if you go to weddings in Jerusalem, there are some people that will have no musical instruments other than a vocalist and a drum kit, because drums is not an instrument.
So kind of like, since it can be a little bit confusing, I'm very glad to be sitting here and learning in the shur. Like, you can go through and learn everything, and you can also just kind of gather from what people do.
Yes, absolutely.
Like if I see, people aren't performing live music outside, that's one thing. So I keep in mind, that's a practice which is done throughout the year. Like all year long, most of the year, people do that all the time.
Yeah.
Jerusalem, people play music and play like religious themes.
Sure.
Often it's a guy with a black hat and But also during this period of Sefirat HaOmer, I've been at like a Motzi Shabbat. There's a guitar, and we pull out the guitar and play some religious tunes during Havdalah, or during the recent Hag or during Shabbat. Every Shabbat we dance around in a circle.
So that's less of a problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think when the Shirot v'Tishbachot really helps here. So he said like you're allowed to use music to accompany your life as it does in general. So you're allowed, like I sing whilst I'm walking, I'm humming, or I'm learning Torah, and certainly on Shabbat, that there's no need at all to cut back on the music that accompanies my life. You follow? It's more about events than sort of like the day-to-day music. Those are the words of the Rav Ovadia Yosef. Rav Moshe Feinstein just wow. Rav Moshe Feinstein agrees, but he adds one. He talks about somebody who's learning to play an instrument in source number 12. Somebody's practicing instruments. If I'm learning in order, let's say I am a musician, that is my trade, and I need to practice in order to keep up on my trade, then you're allowed to play music during Sefirat Omer. But if you're only doing it for pleasure, then you're not allowed to play during Sefirat Omer. Meaning, if I'm doing it because in order to create simcha, then I'm trying to avoid the music that leads to simcha during Sefirat Omer, and that would be forbidden. But if I'm doing it just, in order to make sure I don't forget how to do this chord or that chord, then this particular moment doesn't give me simcha. I'm just like making sure I don't get rusty. That's allowed. I think that neither Rav Ovadia nor Rav Moshe Feinstein say this, but I think they're both. I wonder if I could say this, and that is, during Sefirat Omer, we are experiencing Avelot. We're experiencing a minor sense of mourning for the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva. And I signify that mourning by people don't get married at this time, and people don't have haircuts at this time. Now, if you think about before the time that recording instruments were around, so I wouldn't necessarily notice Sefirat Omer in any great way. Sort of 200 years ago, haven't been to a wedding for a month, or I haven't had a haircut for a month. But if I have a beard and I have a haircut every 2 months, I might not notice that I'm mourning. You follow? During Sefirat Omer. You follow what I'm saying? Now that music has become a much greater part of our lives, we feel the loss during Sefirat Omer to a greater extent because music has become a greater part of our lives. You follow? So music that would lead me to simcha at a time where I'm on this little bit of avelut, like a wedding, is something that we want to avoid during this time of year. During Sefirat Omer, it's a very, very difficult line to draw. But the music that just accompanies my life, and I would humbly suggest, if I listen on my earphones to, I don't really care what it is, it's really just like background noise when I'm going for a walk. I'm not listening to music. You follow? It's just 200 years ago I might have listened to the trees or the birds or the horse and carts going past, and nowadays the background noise in my life is coming from my phone. You follow? That's not listening to music, and that would be okay. But music that gives me simcha, so for example, if I'm a guitarist, and at the end of the day I just want to release everything, then play guitar, and then I just feel great, that probably is a bit of an issue, unfortunately. But the music that's a background is less of an issue. You follow? It's a bit harsh. It's because the people that don't care about the music, that's okay. But people that care about it, you follow what I'm saying?
Yes. So there's what's definitely allowed, which is right. I haven't known this, which is good to know now. But say practicing scales on guitar.
Yeah, so you can
don't
do
get
that.
much musical value. But I haven't been practicing my guitar. Usually I try to practice, however many few minutes. 20
Yeah,
minutes.
so that's very important to do. I have a friend who's a cello player, and he distinguishes as a non-musician. I can't understand this, but you have their taragilim exercises that he does to keep his fingers nimble.
Yes.
And then there are moments that he play just captured by the music. So the exercises, in order to make sure I'm top of my, top of the game, that's absolutely permitted because I'm practicing. But to sort of to use the music in order to escape, that's probably not such a good idea.
Okay.
Do you get that distinction?
Yeah, well, just for me, I'm doing all this math in my mind. I'm trying to figure out because then there's where exactly do you draw the line? Here, for example, I'm a lyricist, and I compose music. I mean, yeah, I compose songs. So I mean, not with an orchestra, but I come up with the chords and the melodies. And so for me to let's say, since I've been at the yeshiva studying This hasn't been a big part of my life, but back in the day, I traveled around the world busking and performing in places I went to. And so for me, like being in the routine to where I can pull my guitar out of the case and make a few bucks on the side of the road is like you need to rehearse your songs. You need to be playing the music.
Yeah, so that you're allowed to do. That you would be allowed to do. As he says over here, do you see what he says over here? Somebody who wants to learn the instrument, especially if it's lefarnasa, exactly what you said, meaning I'm learning because I have to be top of my trade because I'm using this skill to earn money.
Yeah.
Then you're allowed to stay at the top of your game because I need to be at the top of my game because this is a source of income for me.
But if, like, say I know that I'm not, doing much performing right now, and I just get home and I want to play my guitar and play like a classic tune that I love just for the fun and just for the enjoyment.
Yeah, so that's less gonna work.
Okay. And then here's a side. I don't want to take too much time away.
No, this is good. Yes. No, because you're mechaded, you're sort of clarifying points, which is good.
Well, I just think this is like a little less relevant, but it might not matter. But I think about like blues music, which is like what I play like if a person knows about the history of rock and roll music, everything comes from the blues.
Obviously.
And the blues comes from actually a lot of inspiration from indigenous North American music.
Oh, I don't know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know, there's a great movie called Rumble about this famous instrumental, 1 minute song called Rumble in the '60s that got banned in schools and stuff by Link Ray, this half Indian musician, and it's because there was a lot of either the grandmothers or the grandfathers, a lot of African Americans still today have indigenous Native American blood. They have Native American ancestors because of I think the African American woman would get together with a Native American man, and there's a history. There's like a reason.
Anyway, let's get to the. Was there a question at the end?
Okay, sorry. Well, in blues music, say you're playing and you want to rehearse a blues solo or something. It's to me, it's very soulful. It's also very mournful. So there's a type of music which I think is not just for joy.
Yeah.
It can be mourning in its essence.
Yeah, that would be okay. It's about the simcha. Yeah, that would be okay. On Yom HaZikaron, there is the some people do play instruments on Yom HaZikaron.
My heart hurts they have all the music.
Yeah, nachon.
Yeah, it makes sense, or even just during the rest of the year,
it's less to do. The music, as the truth is, it'll be a nice point with which to close our discussion. Music is a vessel; it's a kli, right? And it can be channeled into different directions. And I think today we've discussed 3 channels and the ramifications of those 3 channels. One channel was the channel of simcha, right? Simcha shel mitzvah, which is like a wedding. That's a positive, that's a good, that's a great one. But I'm going to limit it to some extent during Sefirat HaOmer, because this simcha shel, this music of simcha, although I can sing it on Shabbat and a brit milah, a bar mitzvah, a pidyon haben, but that's not the right type of music for this type of year. That's one type of music, simcha shel mitzvah. Then we spoke about bad music, and that is the music that we don't listen to after destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, even this luxurious music, the music that we don't listen to anymore. That's another type of music. And then there's a third type of music that I think has only existed for the last 150 years. And that's the music that's available nowadays on our phones. That sort of the accessibility of music that didn't exist until quite recently. The background music that just accompanies me on my day day-to-day life, I think that's less of a problem. And I think I don't think that the Shulchan Aruch and the Magen Avraham were talking about that background music. Now, you're quite right that it's very, very difficult to draw the line, and the main people say, I'm not going to draw the line, and I'm going to avoid it. But for those people, know that it's really, I'm not listening to the music, there's background whilst I get on the bus or something else, then that would not be a problem during Sefirat Omer, because it's not simcha music, it's not bad music, it's just the background to my life. Something that that's only existed relatively recently, and that would be okay.
Yeah, like what Rob said, like what is it like? Even now, cause like we have music different now. I used to only listen to music like when it was like a simcha or something very big. That's when I listen to music. Now, like you listen to music for whatever people.
Exactly, you've got on this little phone here. You can listen to just anything. Like millions of. It's a crazy world we live in. So, sweet people, it's been a joy to learn with you. We'll pause here. I think next time, or at least sometime soon, we'll have another discussion on music. But this time, not about Sefirat Omer, but then more about sort of a general Jewish approach to music. Yishar Koach.